Coming up tonight on Everything is Electric, we recap a massive Week 4 of college football action, including talking about some coaches potentially being on the hot seat. We also recap a shocking and dramatic Week 3 of NFL action, and we recap all the big matches from WWE Wrestlepalooza and AEW All Out from over the weekend. All that and more coming up next. All sports, all wrestling, all the time. This is Everything is Electric. Well. It is good to be back on Everything is Electric on this beautiful September 23rd, 2025, on the beautiful campus of Middle Tennessee State University. I am your host, Dylan Simmons. Hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. It was kind of a rainy and dreary weekend depending on where you were at in the country. We had several rain delays across different games in college football on Saturday. I don't think we had any in the NFL on Sunday, thankfully enough. I was at the MTSU football game this past weekend against Marshall. We had our game delayed for, I think, 2.5 hours, give or take. So we ended up not getting done until probably about midnight or so. I didn't leave the stadium until about 12:30. So it was an experience, but hey, it's all for the love of the game at the end of the day. And that is why we have Everything is Electric. It's all sports, all wrestling, all the time. That's what it's all about. And we're going to give it all to you in our first reaction show of Everything is Electric, our second episode overall. And I'm not going to waste your time. I'm going to get right into it. Let's get going with college football Week 4 action. I didn't think that I would be talking too much about this one, but it got a lot of the national press attention, and I am, of course, a Miami Hurricanes fan, and it has to do with a coach that we probably need to discuss regarding his potential of being on the hot seat. So we'll get into it. Number 4 Miami took on Florida in Coral Gables this past weekend. College game day was there. Pat McAfee went off the high dive. It was truly an incredible experience, especially for those in person. Obviously, I was not one of them, but I was watching as best I could, and it was definitely an entertaining time, both on game day and at the game. And it seems like the talk of college football after Week 4 is the status of two head coaches in particular. We're going to talk about one of them in just a second. But first, let's talk about the actual game, Miami versus Florida. Miami took care of business. It was not perfect, but it was definitely the most mortal they have looked this season, or I should say it was definitely the most mortal that they have looked this season. But I think you have to look at the metrics and look at the situation behind this. Florida had their backs to the wall. They're trying to survive with what's left of their season. They were going to be tough to put down no matter what was going on, in my opinion. When players play with desperation, it brings out the best in them a lot. And I'm sure it's not just me who's told you that before. I'm sure you've heard it from whoever in the past. Everyone knows that when you got your back against the wall, you try everything you can to make something stick. Florida was always going to be kind of in that situation in this game. And I think Miami knew that going in, that this is not going to be a gimme. You're going to have to do everything you can to make sure that Florida does not come out and make things challenging for you. Now, what impressed me the most was the play of the two defenses. Miami's defense, they played great. Let's not sleep on the Gators, though, either. Carson Beck, I love him, but he looked a little shaky at points. Credit to the Florida defense for that. I think it's the best defense that Miami will play all season long. Their secondary did a great job of locking down a lot of those star wideouts. Carson Beck goes for 160 passing yards. He also had that crazy interception at the end of the third quarter, and that is where I began to cringe into oblivion, I will say, because I thought for sure that is when Miami was going to do their typical Miami unraveling, lose the game, everything gets sideways. Thankfully, that did not take place, and Miami was able to get it down into low gear, kick it into high gear, I should say, and figure it out throughout the rest of the game. Under a lot of circumstances, Florida, in actuality, would have probably won this game, but unfortunately, DJ Lagway is not making 5-star tracks right now. Instead, it's 5 INT tracks. And hey, that's not a shot at DJ. I think he's a talented quarterback, but at the end of the day, he hasn't had the consistency in his performance in these first few games. He wasn't as bad in this game as he was for the LSU game, but again, it's not a super high bar to clear. Obviously, I think a lack of practice in the offseason has really hurt DJ, and it seems to me like he has not been able to completely get into to rhythm as a result since the season started. We saw him look pretty good against Long Island at the start of the year, but ever since, it's like he's been trying to play catch-up. Ever since we saw what he did in that USF game, he had 61 passing yards and 12 for 23. That is not going to beat hardly any team, much less Miami. And again, you've got to credit a lot of that to the Miami defense, Ruben Bain, Messidor, all those guys for really locking down Lagway in Florida. But again, Florida's offense has been nothing to write home about, even though they've played 3 straight really good defenses. But it wasn't just him. The rushing game wasn't there either. His top rusher, Lagway's top rusher, Jaden Baugh, only got 41 yards in this game. That Miami defensive line was nearly impenetrable down the stretch. There was no marching around the city 7 times to break down the walls of Jericho. There was no breaking down the Miami defensive line in this game. It just was not going to happen. What really turned the tide for the Canes in this game was Mark freaking Fletcher. He has had great games, but this was his masterpiece, in my opinion. 116 yards on 24 carries. It really should be said that he was the guy that carried this team in the second half to a win. People are probably going to overlook or forget that it was a 13-7 game with 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. But I will say this, despite the fact that it was close, you've got Mark Fletcher who can carry the ball and just bulldoze any defensive line he comes across. That's what he did, and Miami, credit to them. Great teams, usually at the end, they're able to close things out and get a victory, even when they're in a close game against an opponent that they may have should have beaten by a few more points. And that's what Miami was able to do. They got 2 touchdowns late. They win by 19 points. And obviously, I don't know how much Cristobal and the Canes took into factor, well, if we win by this much, the committee will view us differently. I don't really think that was on their mind, but it doesn't hurt the situation. Again, I think it's stupid that we have to even consider that. To me, if you beat an SEC opponent, especially one who's got talent like Florida, despite the 1-3 start, I think that should be rewarded. The AP did so. We'll talk a little bit more about that possibly later on. But you know what? Miami did what they needed to do. Not a pretty performance, but again, a win is a win, and now Miami's got a bye week. And then, of course, 2 weeks' time, Tallahassee, Canes versus Knowles. Potential top 10, potential top 5 matchup. It's going to be fun. I will certainly be watching when that one goes down. As for Florida, I think that we all know, we can all sense it in our guts. Even the most hopeful of us know it's time to move on from Billy Napier. And I have a lot of Florida fans in my life who have said this for a while, or there are also some who have put it kind of in the back of their mind and didn't want to say it out loud. They wanted to believe that there was going to be some way to turn this around, but I think that there is no disputing it anymore. It's time to go. Billy is still a talented coach, and I think he deserves more chances to stay in college football, but he's on his 4th season. We're seeing the same problems. When you have the same recurring problems, the same issues, underwhelming offense, lack of discipline, and a lot of losses in these big games, you can't avoid that. It would be different if this was season 1 or 2 and we're still waiting to see him get his full staff, his full team in there, but this is year 4. And in today's college football landscape, that is an eternity. Some coaches barely get 2 years. This guy is on his 4th season, and despite some good stretches, he just hasn't been able to fully translate it onto the football field and have the season that Florida fans not only want, but I think they deserve. And obviously, as a Canes fan, I'm not the biggest fan of the Florida Gators, but I do understand they've got a national championship pedigree. They think they can contend with anybody in the country, and quite frankly, when they have the right coach and the right players, they can. We've seen that before, but it hasn't been that way for the last 15 or so years since Urban Meyer left. And that's where you gotta make changes. You gotta do what you gotta do. Florida was, you could argue, impatient with coaches before, and I think that kind of changed their perspective with this Napier thing. They didn't want to be accused of the same thing again, so they give Napier a little more time, and this is kind of the result that we get. Billy Napier has kind of hung on for too long, and I think that this is one that's cut and dry. Last year he had a great run, but I don't see that happening again late this season. With the schedule they've got coming up, it's even worse than the gauntlet they had last year. A lot of those games are going to be on the road. It's going to be tough for Florida to, in any way, overcome that stretch and for Billy Napier to get this done. So I think Billy Napier's time at Florida is probably at an end, and there's no shame in that. I don't think there's any shame in admitting that, it's time to change. We can go and find somebody else. You still acknowledge and thank the guy for what he did with the program, but it's time to make a change. And I think that Gators fans and Napier know that. So that's my Miami versus Florida take. Another shocking result that I think some people thought was possible but didn't fully expect: Clemson versus Syracuse. I never thought we would be talking Clemson versus Syracuse on this show after week 1. After week 4. Funny how things work. It might as well be week 1 for Clemson because they are really, it's kind of been a rehash of what we saw in that LSU-Clemson game. Ever since that ended, it's been the same story. And I thought long and hard about how I was going to tackle this, so I'll go ahead and say what I have to say. Dabo, welcome to the I Just Had My Season Ended by Fran Brown and Syracuse Club. You get to join the 2024 Hurricanes in that elite fraternity. Trust me, it's a great club to be in. Credit to Fran Brown, credit to Syracuse. But obviously, it's a bummer for you, Clemson. Listen, I'm stunned. I legit picked Clemson in the preseason to not only win the ACC, but to make the college football playoff semifinals this season. And I got fooled. And I look dumb as a result. But what I will say is I wasn't the only one. There were a lot of you out there, don't be afraid to admit it, who thought Clemson was going to be at that level. So go ahead and say it. Just own up to it, because I'm owning up to it. You can too. So own up to it in the comments as well. There's no shame in that. And you don't have to be slighted because you thought that, because I think it was a pretty fair stance among a lot of folks. Honestly, I got fooled by the returning talent and what Clemson had done in the past in these spots. Key word there, past. And a lot of people have been discussing Clemson's past and what does that do for their present and what standard should they be held to or not be held to. I'll say it like this. This game against Syracuse was the equivalent of that scene from Cars 3. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Where Lightning McQueen gets out in front after his pit stop, but then he watches Jackson Storm and all the young guys drive by him like it's nothing. And Darryl Waltrip is in that movie. He's called Daryl Cartrip. Great pun right there. And he mentions this quote, which really stuck with me, and I thought about it after the Clemson game was over. He says, McQueen is fading and fading fast. Clemson is on the verge of being in that same boat. Clemson, to me, is Lightning McQueen. They're trying to stay out in front of the pack. They're coming out of pit lane, or in this case, coming off of last season, thinking they're going to be able to contend for it all. But then, you've got the younger coaches, the newer teams, the NIL, transfer portal developed programs who are rushing past them with new resources, younger players, and they're outdoing Clemson right now. And I think that Dabo might be on the verge of crashing into the wall and barrel rolling down the backstretch. I hope that's not the case because I love Dabo and I love what he's done with the program. I have a lot of respect for what he's done for Clemson, but I worry that we're at that stage. Now, as for the game itself, this Syracuse team looked to me like they straight up out-efforted Clemson. Even without Steve Angeli late, by the way, get well soon after the torn Achilles. That's an absolute bummer. That guy was balling. He was having a great start to the season after that Tennessee game, and I think he's going to be great next year if indeed he does come back to Syracuse. But going back to Syracuse themselves, even without Steve Angeli, they had a backup named Ricky Collins, and Ricky Collins balled out. He ended up scoring a touchdown late, great passing touchdown that kind of put the game out of reach. Clemson had over 500 total yards in this game, and they still lost by 13 points. That kind of tells the story if you don't fully grasp it just by the score itself. And you know why that was? It was the turnovers. And it's not just the 2 turnovers on the box score. No, they had 3 turnovers on downs in the second half. That is what loses you football games, ladies and gentlemen. I honestly worry that Clemson may be in the same boat that FSU was last year, where they ended up losing their first couple games, and for lack of a better term, they just kind of resigned themselves to their fate. I think today's college football culture and what the media says about it is all or nothing. And what I mean by that is if you don't win national titles and you don't make the college football playoff, then your program has effectively failed for the season. I'm not speaking for players, but I do wonder if that sort of mental attitude is kind of what's taking place here at Clemson. Because I don't doubt that Dabo isn't trying to get these guys motivated. But when you have that high level of an expectation, when you fail that early on in the season, obviously it's going to make you feel some type of way about it, even if you're trying to deny it. And I think that Clemson feels let down and disappointed. Maybe it was after the LSU game. Maybe the Georgia Tech game is when it really set in. But either way, they look lost out there right now, and I don't think they know exactly what they need to do to win a game. That's not to say they can't win a game, but I think that that self-doubt may be creeping in just a little bit, and the idea that, well, we can't be a national champion, so is this season really worth it? Now, I don't doubt that Dabo is not going to try to get those guys to turn this thing around, and he may very well do so. But in these first 4 games, that is kind of what I've seen so far. Now, some people, I think they're jumping the gun a little bit, have called for Dabo to be fired. I think he's still a great coach who has fallen on hard times, and I don't think that firing him right now makes a whole lot of sense because we're talking about a guy who won an ACC championship last year, which Dabo will gladly tell you himself. Just listen to his press conferences. But I do think he's clinging on to a vision of what he thinks college football should be while not embracing the reality of the situation. I don't even necessarily disagree with Dabo because I think that what he wants the sport to be might be better than what we currently have, but it's costing him the chances to truly compete. That said, I don't think he's going to get fired even if this season is a total disaster. I think he's got job security, and to be honest with you, if Clemson were to fire him, what does Clemson become? I mean, who are you going to get right now that would be arguably better than Dabo Swinney? You may be able to attract a high-caliber coaching candidate, but you're going to have to buy out Dabo for, I think, $60 million, and you're going to have to hope that whoever the guy is that you're bringing in can bring Clemson not only to an ACC championship level, but a national championship level, which is going to be hard in the ACC no matter what program you are. Even the best of the best seem to have a hard time. Obviously, Miami and FSU notwithstanding this year, they both look like potential playoff and title contenders, but it's hard to do it in the Atlantic Coast Conference these days, and I don't know if Clemson is going to be as desirable of a job as it used to be. But hey, we'll find out. That's all I got to say about Clemson versus Syracuse. Now that we've talked about a couple of games featuring unranked teams, let's talk about an actual top 20 matchup with, I think, possible playoff stakes. And I mentioned this last week on the first episode that I thought this could have playoff stakes and that whoever lost this game wasn't necessarily eliminated. I don't know if I feel the same way about that. We need to talk about this, and you know what? It's time for the credibility of this show to sink on its second episode. So, it was already a good run, guys. In episode 1, I predicted that Illinois would not only go into Bloomington and compete with the Hoosiers, but they would beat Indiana. Little did I know that IU would not only win, but they would do so by more points than the Florida Gators have scored in the last 3 weeks combined. On behalf of myself, I would like to send an apology to Curt Cignetti and the entire state of Indiana. I've been there before. I've actually been to Bloomington, as a matter of fact. I called an MTSU baseball game up there, I think it was the spring before, spring 24, when they played Indiana. Beautiful ballpark, beautiful university, and I should not disparage the great people of Indiana and Indiana University because they've got a great college football program. And Curt Cignetti, hey, I looked him up on Google yesterday, and it said that he wins. And, in fact, he does. This was like when I stepped onto a baseball field for the first time in middle school. I was completely overmatched. That's what it felt like Illinois was in this game. I don't have to give much analysis because 63-10 kind of tells the story for itself. Fernando Mendoza, he's a special player. The way he dissected that Illini defense was incredibly impressive. His timing on throws, his understanding of that defense, his understanding of the system, really, really impressive. Here are the stats, and prepare to have your jaw on the floor. 21 for 23, 267 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns. He had more touchdowns than incompletions. And it wasn't just him. Kobe Martin, big day on the ground. Even the backups, when they were thrust into the game, even after Indiana had kind of said, all right, we'll let off the gas. We'll let the backups get some play, which, by the way, in a top 20 matchup to have the backups come in is just disgusting stuff to see. And they were still torching Illinois. So that kind of tells you how it was going down towards the end. And, I think it may be time to talk about Fernando Mendoza in the idea of him being a Heisman contender. Obviously, it's early in the season, and there's a lot more football to be played here, but Indiana and Fernando Mendoza, if he keeps playing and keeps having stats like these, I mean, it's going to be between him and John Mateer, in my opinion, because that was just unbelievable. I don't think I've seen a quarterback perform quite like that all season long. Give Indiana credit. They won when a lot of people were doubting their credibility, especially after last year, myself included. I was asking the question, is Indiana a one-time team? Are they going to be a fluke? Are they going to flame out this year? No. It looks like Indiana's here to stay, and Curt Cignetti will keep winning for a long time to come. Honestly, the fact that the AP does not have them in the top 10 to me is atrocious, because you look at what they did. And Illinois is still ranked, by the way, which is a whole other conversation. Again, the AP poll, there's so much I can say about it. I'll try to keep my thoughts in until later. But Indiana's a top 10 team, in my opinion. They should be in the AP, and I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. Illinois, well, listen, I'm officially ready to sound the fraud alarm on them. I was concerned about them being number 9 last week. I think a lot of folks were. And to be honest, I felt it in my bones that the Illini might just fall short here. And I should have trusted my gut. I should have trusted it. But no, I decided instead that I was going to be contrarian. I was going to pick Illinois because this was going to be their time to arrive. They did not arrive. They instead departed, and they're probably still licking their wounds back in Champaign, Illinois. Like I said Thursday, though, the season isn't over yet, but my goodness, there is a lot of work to be done. 31-9 on first downs. Indiana had 31. Illinois had 9 first downs. 1 for 10 on third downs. I mean, goodness gracious. A net 2 rushing yards. Indiana's defense is solid, but I mean, Illini, come on. What are we doing here? Which they know that. I'm not saying anything they don't already understand. I'm not trying to pile on here, but you got to get these corrected, especially with who's coming in for their next game. Because USC is coming to town on Big Noon Kickoff, and they're looking to make their own statement. They've got their own doubters this year, and Illinois is going to have to try to find a way to play catch-up the rest of the season. And their hopes of making the playoff diminish a lot because they're going to have a 63-10 loss hanging over their head no matter where they go. It's not impossible to overcome that. We saw Notre Dame overcome a Northern Illinois loss last year and still make the playoff. Heck, Indiana themselves got boat raced by Ohio State and still got in because that was their only loss. So there is a chance for Illinois, especially if they win out. But it's hard for me to see a situation like that happening. Spoiler alert, we'll probably talk about this more on Thursday as well, but I've initially at least got USC winning the game on Saturday. Now, moving on to number 22 Auburn, taking on number 11 Oklahoma. Big win for OU right here. A lot closer than I was expecting. I think I said Oklahoma would win 34-10. Give credit to Auburn. They really surprised me. They fought with everything they had to make this a game late. Just wasn't enough. John Mateer was great again. 271 passing yards. I think concerns of him not working in the SEC have been pretty much completely quashed. He was a great game manager in this one, helped his team to do just enough to always be one step ahead of Auburn, and he didn't make the critical mistake to give Auburn a chance to step back into this game. Isaiah Satania, massive game too, 127 receiving yards. If you didn't know who this guy was, you do now. Isaiah Satania might be one of the top 5 receivers in the SEC with what he's done so far this season. He is lighting it up out there. It's pretty darn impressive what he was able to do against that Auburn secondary. And listen, it was a solid game by Jackson Arnold too. 220 yards, but not as big of a Roughing threat. I don't know what that is. A rushing threat. I created another new word, guys. Last week it was boyist. This week it's roughing. So, we're already 2 for 2 on creating new words on the show. They did not have a single rusher. Auburn did over 61 yards in this game. And those star wideouts really didn't get much going outside of Cam Coleman. Oklahoma's defense is, to me, one of the more underrated units in the country. They were talked a lot about last year, but mainly in comparison to their, quite frankly, crummy offense. This year, they look just as good as they did, but because the Oklahoma offense is looking better, they're not getting quite as much spotlight, I think, as they would be. Oklahoma's defense, to me, could arguably be on the same level as LSU and Miami. Maybe not quite there, but it's pretty darn close. Give credit to the Sooners, no doubt. They had 10 sacks on the day. 10 sacks. Poor Jackson Arnold. Those are the 3 words that I got to say about that. Poor Jackson Arnold. He was just getting terrorized in the pocket all day long, and he tried to escape. I mean, he tried to do what he could do, and sometimes he was able to make plays, but when you're getting pressured like that and your offensive line is just getting completely manhandled, there's really not much you can do. But to me, Auburn should not be ashamed of this loss. They played hard, and they played really well in enemy territory. I have doubted Hugh Freeze, and I've doubted Auburn this year, but much like Tennessee did against Georgia, this loss, if anything, only made me feel more confident about Auburn's possibility of contending. And to be honest, that might be because I'm just really liking Oklahoma this year. But when you can hang with a team that has a lot of talent like Oklahoma does, I feel like you're moving in the right direction. And by the way, they did that in Norman. With all the pressure, with Jackson Arnold feeling the pressure of going to his former team against his old coach, his old teammates, they were still able to contend. And in a different universe, a more fair universe, we'll get to that in just a second. Don't worry, I didn't forget it. They may have won this game. I think that this game should make Auburn fans feel excited. I think they should feel as though they're moving in the right direction. It was far from a perfect game for them, and they still heavily contended. So that should really give you a lot of excitement, I think, if you're in Auburn, Alabama. To me, this team, they may only go 6-6, 7-5, but they're going to contend a lot more than they have in previous seasons. I think Auburn's going to be a pretty sneaky team to watch in the SEC, and they may take down a couple of juggernauts. That Iron Bowl, I think it's in Jordan-Hare this year. It's going to be interesting. Going to be interesting to see what Auburn's able to do against the old Crimson Tide. Listen, officiating had a role to play in this game. All I will say is that this level of officiating in this sport, it's got to be improved. I am not the guy to go out there and cannot talk, folks. Blame officials for winning or losing a team a game. But I am going to call out officials or call out conferences when officiating is not up to the standard that it should be. And I understand that officials have a very tough job. They have a lot they have to keep track of. And this may have just been one that they missed. But you guys know what call I'm talking about. It was pretty obvious, pretty blatant that looked as though it was some sort of illegal, I guess not an illegal substitution. I can't remember exactly what they called it. I guess a substitution decoy is what it would be at the end of the day. But whatever the case is, obviously the touchdown should not have counted. And if you don't believe me, just ask the SEC because they said it as well. They issued a public statement saying, yep, we blew the call. Not going to change anything as far as whether or not the call actually will stand, because it is going to stand. The game's already been played, and you can't go around and just turn it back. It's not going to be much solace for Auburn fans. At the end of the day, Auburn can't completely blame this game on officiating, but I can understand them being frustrated by that. I hate it when this happens because people can make the excuse of refs and ignore the game that we just saw be played out. A lot of times people do that. They'll look at one or two bad ref calls, and they'll just be like, it's the ref's fault, you see? Jeez, touch the mic. Sorry, microphone. It's the ref's fault. They're the ones who cost us this game. It's all them. If they hadn't done that, we would have won this game. And they overlook everything else that happened, which I really dislike. I never think that blaming the refs for everything else that went wrong in the game is the right way to go about it. But that's the reality we live in. And that's why officiating, especially in that big of a situation with that big of a call, you got to be on top of it. So hopefully that'll improve. We'll see. Mistakes will be made. I understand that, but that was a pretty blatant misstep. All right, for our college football blitz package for this Tuesday edition of Everything is Electric, real quick, we'll talk number 17 Texas Tech defeats number 16 Utah. They blast them in Utah, and if I'm not mistaken, the final score of this game was actually 34-10. So I had the 34-10 score right. I just picked the wrong game to give it to. I said that would be Auburn, Oklahoma. What I should have said is it's going to be Texas Tech, Utah. This is another game that I got horrifically wrong because I said that Utah would win this game. And I was wrong. I was completely wrong. Texas Tech was the far superior team, even without Baron Wharton for stretches of this game. It was pretty obvious who the better team was, who the better roster was. Texas Tech just straight up drilled Utah in their home stadium. They look like the real deal. I said this was going to be kind of a prove-it game, an announcement game for them if they wanted to be one of the true contenders in the Big 12. Well, they announced themselves. They announced themselves in a big way. And now they've gotten past one of their tougher opponents left on their schedule. There will be, I think, at most one or two ranked opponents left. We'll see how the rest of the season goes for them. But the path to get to Dallas and the Big 12 championship is wide open for the Red Raiders now. I would say they are probably the favorites at the moment to take the league. We'll see if Arizona State, BYU, or anybody else can get their stuff together. But Texas Tech is legit. And I give full credit to the Red Raiders for what they were able to do. This was an absolute shellacking of a game, and Texas Tech has truly announced themselves among the elite of the Big 12, so credit to the Red Raiders. Number 21, Michigan, handed Nebraska their 28th straight loss to a ranked opponent. My goodness. Poor Nebraska, and I feel bad for Huskers fans because they are some of the most loyal fans you'll find in the country. When I was living in South Dakota earlier on this year, I actually had the pleasure to meet quite a few Husker fans. A lot of people from South Dakota actually go to college at the University of Nebraska, which a lot of people may not know, but it's close by, and the Huskers are, I'd say, the biggest major brand that's close by to where I was living. So Nebraska is really popular even in South Dakota. Those fans, they pack out Lincoln Memorial Stadium almost each and every game. They love their Huskers. They love their football. And I really want to see the program succeed. They fought hard in this game. They did what they could. But Michigan, who I did predict to win this game, I at least got this one right, they were the better team at the end of the day, and they won the game in the trenches. The worst thing that Nebraska did in this game is they let Michigan dictate the pace and dictate how they wanted to play football. Michigan, we all know what they are. Smash mouth, grind it out, run the football up the middle, and take it to the house. And that's what they did about 5 or 6 times. And Nebraska, even with a Hail Mary, could not keep up with Michigan at their home stadium. And it was pretty clear that the Wolverines were the team to beat on that day. The only thing surprising when it was all said and done, was that it was as close as it was. The fact that Michigan only won by 3 points was kind of shocking because with how they dominated, you would have expected it to be a much bigger deficit that Nebraska was facing. But regardless of that, Michigan gets the win, and now they'll have Sharon Moore back for their next game, which I think is a Big Ten game. I can't remember exactly who it's with right now. We may talk about that on Thursday. But regardless, Michigan looking pretty good. Big win for them. Congratulations to the Wolverines, and we'll see what Nebraska can do the rest of the way, but I think as far as playoff contention goes, it's going to be tough for them down the stretch, especially with this loss now hanging over their head. Mike Gundy is now on the hot seat. I think he is counting his days with Oklahoma State right now. I heard this morning, but apparently if he indeed does get fired, he will be a part of the coaching search due to a very bizarre clause in his contract. So Mike Gundy will actually help select the next coach of Oklahoma State if he indeed does get fired, which is weird, but there you go. The loss to Tulsa Friday night was obviously much maligned, and Mike Gundy has received a lot of grief because of it. I like Gundy, and I like Oklahoma State. I think they're a great program. Actually, yesterday was the anniversary of the I'm a Man, I'm 40 press conference, believe it or not. It's been 18 years since that day in 2007. I don't know if we're going to be getting any repeats of that with Mike Gundy in 2025, but this is obviously a tough spot for him to be in, and it looks like much the same as Billy Napier's doing right now. He might be counting his days as the Oklahoma State head coach, which stinks. But sometimes the game passes a guy by, and you're just not the same coach that you used to be. And it seems as though that may be the case with Mike Gundy. So tough break for him and a tough break for Oklahoma State. looks like their season is gonzo, at least for now. But hey, maybe miracles can happen and Gundy will stick around in some crazy fashion. We'll see. Real quick, I wanted to mention this. This was not in the script for this week, but the AP, again, continues to fail us. There were a lot of bad ranks this week for some teams. I did agree with Miami going to number 2. I thought that had been overdue for a little bit, especially after the way they dominated USF. But, hey, better late than never. Of course, I am biased, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. Penn State versus Oregon officially is going to be a top 6 matchup, according to the Associated Press. But there are some rankings in the teens that are really weird right now. Vanderbilt only at 18 after a couple of dominating wins. I don't quite get that. There are some other teams that should be ranked higher. I think Iowa State, is it 13 or 14? I can't remember. They're ranked way too high right now, and I think they'll get exposed sooner rather than later. But, hey, I'd love for the Cyclones to prove me wrong on that. But the AP's in a bad way right now. If you would like me to fully review the AP poll on next Tuesday's show, feel free to leave that in the comments, and I'll make sure to do that for you guys. So that is our college football segment for this week. We went 35 minutes on college football. My goodness gracious. We'll have to make up some time throughout the rest of the show, but I will still try to do my due diligence for the rest of our programming. Let's talk some NFL, and let's talk Eagles-Rams. We said last week that this was going to be one of the games to watch in the NFL, and boy, it did not disappoint. This was a game that makes you proud to be a football fan. I expected a fun game. I did not see this coming. Jalen Hurts, again, shows why he's got Champions DNA, 226 yards, 3 touchdowns, and his ability to answer late with his team on that touchdown pass to Devontae Smith shows you why this guy was able to get it done in the postseason last year. And not just Hurts, but the entire team's ability to overcome a 26-7 deficit in the third quarter. A lot of teams, and I mean a lot of teams, would just fold at those odds, but the Eagles are not like most teams. As a team themselves, they seem to elevate their level of play when their backs are against the wall. That's when they seem to be at their best, when the pressure is on. It was far from a perfect game, but it seemed like they knew what they had to do to take down the Rams late. You learn a lot about this team when they're facing adversity. We've learned here that the Eagles are still the Eagles. And we also learned that A.J. Brown, contrary to popular belief, is still, in fact, playing football for the Philadelphia Eagles. He got 109 yards and only 1 touchdown. Nothing special. Just going out there and lighting up another defense. So A.J. Brown is still very much around and doing some big stuff. He is here. It doesn't wipe away the first 2 games, by the way, for Philly receivers, but I think it shows they're still very much alive, as that Harry Potter quote once rung out. Jordan Davis, that man at the end of the game had the utter gall to not only block a game-winning field goal attempt from the Rams, but then took it all the way back into the end zone because, hey, why not? I loved what Boomer said on Monday Night Football last night about it. He was not rumbling, bumbling, stumbling. He was cruising to the end zone with Jordan Davis, and he had some pretty good speed. So credit Jordan Davis and credit the Eagles special teams for blocking that game-winning field goal attempt. For the Rams, this loss obviously really stinks. This was a game that you had in your hands, and it seemed as though the Rams were announcing themselves as NFC contenders, which they may very well still be, but obviously this is a missed opportunity. You got to finish the job when you have a team like the Eagles on the ropes, and they just did not do that. I don't think it was a situation where the Rams' offense got stagnant late, though, because I watched back the game. They still looked aggressive to me, and others can correct me if I'm wrong, if you think the Rams were too conservative, but I think they were still trying to push the ball down the field. Maybe it was Stafford just not being in rhythm or his receivers not being in direct rhythm with him, but it looked like the Eagles' defense just bowed up a little bit. To me, that's what I got more out of this than the Rams' offense collapsing in any way. I think the Eagles made the necessary adjustments coming out of the locker room, and credit the Eagles staff for doing that. With that said, going scoreless in the second half is still a bitter pill to swallow when you've got an offensive mastermind like Sean McVay. It stinks for the Rams, but if I'm an LA fan, I am far from, over with this season. Obviously, there's a lot of football left to be played, and you're still looking like a really good team. And you can look at it this way. We were up 26-7 on the defending Super Bowl champions, and we took them to the limit. Yeah, we lost. Yes, it stinks, but we will have a chance to possibly play them later on in the season if we can take care of our business. So I'm not worried about the Rams, and I'm especially not worried about the Eagles. Both are going to be around, and I think both will be contenders at the end of the year. So credit them for this awesome game. It was definitely one of those 4.5-star brawls that you just love to watch as a football fan. One of the games of the year so far, and we've had a lot of good games. Another great game. Last night on Monday Night Football, the Detroit Lions took on the good old-fashioned Baltimore Ravens, which I somehow put down as Lions versus Rams. That's why I said good old-fashioned. Whenever I say something like that in an odd way, usually it's so that I can have some time to think. I didn't get taught this by Myron Cope, that old legendary Pittsburgh Steelers broadcaster, but he did bring it up one time, and I thought, you know what, that's a good tip, so I use that myself sometimes. This was a phenomenal game from start to finish. High scoring, as you would expect. It was about as evenly contested as you could imagine, at least from the start. I don't get to watch a lot of NFL games live. I'm usually kind of busy on Sundays, but I always try to make sure to watch the Monday night game live as it's happening, and I was able to watch most of this one. And I gotta say, the quarterback play was sensational. Lamar Jackson, Jared Goff, both of them played incredibly well. Hardly any complaints on either. Goff goes 20 for 28, 202 yards, and a TD. Lamar ends up with a 21-27 stat line, 288 yards, and 3 passing touchdowns. So both QBs had a great night. Both looked accurate. Both had great touch on the ball, and they lit up the opposing secondaries. So I bet you're wondering, if you didn't watch this game, what ended up being the determinant factor in the Lions winning this game 38-30. Well, I can't say for certain that this is all of it, but to me, this is probably the biggest part of it. The Ravens' run defense couldn't stop David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Detroit ended up with a 224-85 rushing yard advantage. Well, that is going to win you a lot of games, and it helped the Lions win this game, even against the best of teams. If you have that kind of rushing ability and rushing advantage over them, you're probably going to outduel them. Give credit as well to the Lions' defense, because after Derrick Henry had that initial explosion in the first quarter, they locked him down. They did not allow him to get his charge going, and they even forced a fumble late in the game to help the Lions seal that. So the Lions' defense and their defensive line has to be credited as well, because they had to adjust to Derrick Henry, and they did so really, really well. The Ravens' defense, to me, has some problems. We saw them give up oodles of points to the Bills, and now they give up 38 points and 426 total yards at home to Detroit. This is not your father's Ravens, and what I mean by that is they don't have a defense that they can lean on anymore to help them win football games. Now, that may be obvious to some people, but it's really prevalent to me, especially this year. You can't have that defense carry you to victories, which the Ravens don't need the defense to carry them to anything, but they do need their defense to step up in certain situations, and I don't know if the Ravens' defense has been able to do that. Now, obviously, turnovers weren't great in this game, but the defense did not bail out the offense on certain occasions. You can't get into shootout after shootout. Just ask the Cincinnati Bengals how that worked out last year, because you're not going to win that many football games. It is not a sustainable style of play. Now, the Ravens' defense did look pretty solid against a somewhat tepid Cleveland offense, but, how are they going to look against the other teams when they have to play more elite squads? Because the Ravens have a pretty tough schedule. They've got Kansas City coming up next week, and I believe that game is in Arrowhead. So Baltimore is going to have a tough time with them, even though the Chiefs' offense has been sputtering. Are the Ravens going to help resuscitate them and bring them back to life? We know the Chiefs are going to get up for that game, so the Ravens have to be ready. As for the Lions, a big win, back on the right track, and it seems like Week 1 might end up being an aberration compared to what we have just seen from them since. I think their offense and their O-line is adjusting just fine. There were a lot of questions about this Lions team after that first week. I think that especially with this win against Baltimore, a lot of those concerns have been put to bed. We saw them perform incredibly well against Chicago offensively. We see it again here. I think Detroit's going to be just fine. Defense could use a little bit of work, but it's not quite as drastic as the Ravens situation. And they've got a really good team culture, a really good coach who can help sort those things out. Biggest thing for Detroit is they've got to avoid injuries. And last year, it really cost them, especially in that divisional round matchup, because they had nobody on defense to stop Jaden Daniels and the Commanders' offense. They've got to avoid injury, but if they can do so, they will certainly be a contender once again, which is tough for a Packers fan like me to say, because not only is Detroit a contender, but they are tied atop the NFC North, which brings me to what I have to talk about briefly next. These are going to be quick summaries of these next few games, but I need to at least mention this one. I did not preview this one very much in the first episode of the show, but Packers versus Browns also took place this past Sunday, and it was a frustrating game, to say the least. And my good friend, Denver Sikorsky, who's also a Packers fan, texted me before the game and after the game and let me know, he's like, I'm worried about this Browns game, man. I don't know if the Packers are going to be able to win this one as easily as people are saying. And I'm like, I just don't see a situation where that happens. The Packers, to me, have the superior roster. They've got a defense that's at least comparable, and I trust Jordan Love more than I do old man Flacco. And I love Joe Flacco, but I didn't see a situation where that could take place. And it was ugly at the start. The Packers were on top, though, 10-0 going into the start of the fourth quarter. Credit to the Browns' run defense. They were unbelievable at holding up Josh Jacobs. And Jordan Love, who needed to step up in that situation, it pains me to say it, he didn't. He did not step up in that situation. And the Browns were able to take the offense and start doing some good things against the Packers D, who's been nigh unstoppable this year. And unfortunately for the Packers, a worrying trend has emerged. In the fourth quarter of a lot of these games, they're giving up a lot more points. We saw them give up, I think it was 14 to the Commanders. I want to say it was 10 points or maybe even 14 to Detroit in Week 1. And now we're seeing a very similar situation here in Week 3. And unfortunately, the offense hadn't built up a good enough of a lead to come back in that game. So the Packers lost. They lost on a walk-off field goal, 13-10, to the Cleveland Browns, who were a winless football team before this game. And it makes no sense to me because you can go out there, you can manhandle a team that was an NFC contender, a Super Bowl contender last year. You can manhandle them on your home field. You can take out a team easily on Thursday Night Football that was in the NFC Championship game a year ago, but against the Cleveland Browns, you can't do anything. Again, I'm trying not to become a parody of myself and start raging out here, but this was really, really frustrating. Thank goodness the Canes did well, because otherwise I would have probably crashed out on Sunday. The Canes helped save me from utter despair this weekend. But I'm not fully, obviously, done with the Packers. It's one loss, and I think it's more of a fluke loss than anything else. I think, if anything, it'll be a wake-up call to a team that needs one. You can't look past opponents. You can't take anything for granted, and I think the Packers did that. I think they looked at this game because they got the Cowboys coming up next week, and I think they said, it's the Cleveland Browns. So good grief, we should manhandle these guys. And they came in lackadaisical, lack of care, lack of attention to detail. And Micah Parsons, he kind of put it well after the game, and I'm not going to say the quote, but they did something in the bed. I'll just put it this way. They crapped the bed. That's what happened to the Packers in this game. Micah said something else, but I'm not going to say the word that he said. It was a tough loss. And Denver texted me before the show today, and he said, man, I told you, and I had to give it to him. Denver was right. He was completely right. The Packers looked past an opponent, and the Browns, give credit to them, great run defense, big win. Maybe it's the start of something special. Maybe they'll get things righted, but we will see. Chiefs-Giants was also Sunday. It was on Sunday Night Football. Chiefs get the win. Kind of an ugly game. I just don't like the vibe I'm getting around the Chiefs. They looked better in the second half, but it was a really ugly first half of football. I got to watch a lot of this game as well. I don't know. If I had to pick right now, I'd probably at least preemptively say I think that Baltimore will beat Kansas City, even if they do have to go on the road. I just don't like what I'm seeing from the Chiefs right now. They may not make the playoffs if this keeps up, which we've seen the Chiefs struggle before, so maybe this is just kind of one aberration of a game against, well, it's not one aberration because they've played poorly against the Chargers, Eagles, and Giants now. But maybe it's just a bad stretch to start the year. Maybe they need time to figure things out. I don't know. But it's definitely concerning for the Chiefs right now, looking like they're having a bit of a hangover from the Super Bowl. And finally, speaking of the AFC West, LA Chargers are now 3-0. All three of those wins have come, I believe, against division opponents. The Chargers look really good. They've taken out the Broncos, they've taken out the Raiders, and they've now taken out they took out the Chiefs in week 1. Got that out of order there. But you get my point, right? They've been able to beat everybody that they've gone up against in the AFC West. Not always pretty, but a lot of Jim Harbaugh football is not pretty. But what it is it's a winning brand of football. And I really did think this Chargers team was going to have a pretty good year this year. Made the playoffs a season ago. Obviously, the season did not end the best way against the Texans, but looks like the Chargers are out for revenge. They do have an injury on the back end to one of their best defensive stars, Khalil Mack, but I still trust this team's got a lot of talent, and they look like they're going to be off to a pretty good start this year. Look for the Chargers to make the postseason, maybe even be a sleeper AFC contender this year. I mean, I don't know. They're looking pretty solid. They may very well take that AFC West crown. We'll see in due time. So that is our NFL coverage for this week. Let's talk real quick about Wrestlepalooza and All Out, and then we'll wrap up our show. Wrestlepalooza will start. John Cena took on Brock Lesnar, and by the way, this was the first wrestling WWE PLE, I should say, on ESPN. Presentation wasn't that different from what we've seen from other shows. ESPN did do a good job of hyping up Wrestlepalooza in the, before the PLE, for lack of a better term. They did a good job of hyping it up and getting people to watch, or trying to get people to watch. Of course, the $30 price tag was probably a big factor for some in not watching. But I will say that Wrestlepalooza definitely had a good presentation at the start. Unfortunately, some of the matches did not deliver. I mentioned in the last show about Cena versus Lesnar that I felt Brock was going to win this match in a dominant squash-like fashion to keep Cena out of the limelight for a while. And that's basically exactly what we saw. I'm not going to give myself too much credit because I think a lot of people thought that could be the case, although a lot of us wanted to deny that was going to happen. Fact stands that Lesnar has always been seen as kryptonite, in kayfabe at least. 2014 SummerSlam, 2012 Extreme Rules, Lesnar just destroyed and bullied John Cena. This was basically that all over again. If you watch the Josh Pate College Football Show, I don't have a Sarah McLachlan special, but that's probably what this would be, because this was a Sarah McLachlan special in Gamebridge Fieldhouse with John Cena and Brock Lesnar. It was just a complete mauling by a wild Brock Lesnar, and I understand the reasoning behind doing this. They're trying to build up Brock Lesnar, obviously, into a monster heel once again. I did not see the Paul Heyman reunion coming, and I don't know if that's teasing something down the line with Brock versus The Vision or Brock versus Seth. Maybe it's a way to eventually shift into Brock versus Braun Breaker at WrestleMania. I don't know exactly how they would go about that, because obviously the Braun Breaker versus Seth Rollins feud has to happen. Maybe it's another situation where Paul has to choose between Brock and Seth, or Brock and The Vision. I don't know how they'll make that work, or maybe it is just what it was, a cameo. We'll see. There was some talk before this match, or actually after this match, about John Cena was actually originally booked to win this match, according to what the dirt sheets say. I think that would have been better than what we got. I understand that John's not going to be here after December, but again, you're putting a damper on the retirement tour, and I guess that. Well, you know what? Actually, I'm not gonna say that Cena should have won. Come to think of it, I'll actually backtrack on that. I think Brock winning in this match setup was probably the best way to do it. I just don't agree with the opponent. That's what I was trying to get across. Because I understand that Cena Lesnar, like I said, it's a big blockbuster match. I said that on Thursday. But again, you could have had a lot of different opponents take on John here, and I think it would have been better off. So I don't care for the decision. The main reason I don't like it is because we're talking about, again, John Cena's retirement tour. He's only got a couple matches left, and we're having him lose in a squash match to Brock Lesnar. I think we know Brock is strong. I think there were other ways to prove it and to have him beat up John Cena, but maybe the point is, well, you're destroying Superman, so it's going to be a big heel move. People will hate him, and it's going to make that eventual loss he has all the more enticing. But I don't see it that way. In my opinion, we're missing out on Cena Styles, which, my gosh, there's been a movement, even by John Cena himself on Twitter, to get this match going. I saw a tweet, and this may not be a real tweet, but I saw this on social media where Cena is even calling out Triple H, being like, hey, let's get this match going. Let's give the people what they want. I think no matter what, Cena does want to see this match. I think Styles wants it. The fans obviously want it, and it would make sense for that to possibly be his retirement match, or at least a match that he has before he walks out the door in December. Even Cena versus Dom, for personal reasons, I would love to see that match, and I think you could have a really good interaction. Maybe you do have John chase that Grand Slam. I don't know if it makes quite a lot of sense because Cena doesn't really need the IC championship. But at the end of the day, I think there are a lot of different matches you could have with Cena, and I don't think Cena-Lesnar was the right choice, despite the box office that it probably drew. It probably did help with the buy rate of this expensive as crap PLE, but this is a short-term spike instead of one that was genuinely built. Wrong decision for me overall, but right decision if you have to do the match. That's the bottom line with this one. And that's the bottom line because I said so. Little Stone Cold shout-out right there. On to a match that I actually really enjoyed. CM Punk and AJ Lee took on Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch, and man, this was a fun mixed tag. This was a really solid match, and I think it was the most entertaining one of the night. Well, no, it's the second most entertaining of the one of the night, but it was definitely a fun match. I know it was far from perfect, but to me, it didn't really need to be. Sometimes you just have to let the moment speak for itself, which I think is what they did here. You don't have to do anything over the top when you've already got a dream scenario in front of you. The draw of this match was AJ Lee obviously being back in the ring, and the mixed tag dream match of Punk and AJ Lee versus Rollins and Becky Lynch, and that's what we got, and I think they did a great job of orchestrating that. With that said, I thought all of the competitors did a really solid job. We knew Punk and Rollins would do good work together. They always do. But I was really impressed with AJ in this match, especially those Black Widow reversals. Those were awesome. I really like that submission finisher she does, the Black Widow. I think it's one of the more unique submission finishers. You don't see moves like that very often in WWE, and she does it really well. Only thing I'm going to say is I think that Becky probably needed to take the Black Widow a little bit differently. That was seemingly a very popular opinion online, and watching it back, yeah, I think that she took it the wrong way. She kind of stood up when she needs to kind of, I guess, be slanted when she's taking the Black Widow. She didn't quite take it the right way. But again, that is a minor complaint for two professionals that have way more talent than I do. And outside of that, I thought it was a really good match when those two were in the ring. The crowd was really into this one, and for good reason. And it helped that this feud had again been built up well over the last few weeks. Character work was awesome. The interactions between Seth and AJ and Punk and Becky, every other combo that you could list from this tag match were also a lot of fun to watch. It was great character work. I loved what Seth did when AJ was on the ground. I mean, he did the skipping thing, which is just, crazy work by Seth Rollins there. And then he threw his own wife. He was trying to throw Becky Lynch on to AJ Lee, or was it Punk? It was Punk, I think, actually, come to think of it. But Punk rolled out of the way, and Rollins ended up dropping his own wife. So, man, Seth, it's a tough time for you, man. You got to be careful what you're doing out there. But thankfully, it looks like everybody's okay. And it was a really fun match. So, character work was good. Great crowd behind this match, and a result that I think we can all agree was probably the right one. Punk and AJ win. As far as what's going to happen after this match, seems like we are getting Rollins versus Cody at Crown Jewel. Didn't see Punk or AJ last night on Raw, so I don't know if they're on ice for the next month or what the plan's going to be. Will we not see them again until Survivor Series or the next PLE after Crown Jewel? Is that bad blood? I'd have to look it up, but either way, we'll see them, I guess, sometime in the future, whether it is November or another October PLE. But good match. I think it was probably the second best of the night, and it was a really fun contest between all those competitors. So I'd give that one a thumbs up. This one I probably wouldn't, though. Cody Rhodes versus Drew McIntyre. Not for the match itself. This was a really solid match. Not anything that is superbly special. However, what I will say is that for a PLE that was hyped for being full of big surprises and wild moments, I expected that this would be a moment where we would see one of those headline-grabbing moments like I was expecting and like they had been hyping up for a while. And by the way, that's not me saying that every match or every PLE needs a shocking moment or a headline-grabbing moment that's going to light up social media. but you have to be careful when you're hyping your shows up and you keep saying, tune in, there's going to be surprises, crazy moments, and wild stuff, and then you don't quite have what people are expecting, because then you leave them feeling disappointed and ripped off, especially, again, when you were charging $30 for people to watch this show. I don't have a lot to say about this match. It was solid between two professionals, again. Unfortunately, I think this is one of those that's going to be forgotten to time, maybe because of some of the other stuff that happened on Wrestlepalooza. Apparently, though, there was another direction that was given for this match, and it could have been a lot better, in my opinion. Cody and Drew pitched to have Randy Orton interfere in this match, since he's been involved with both Drew and Randy recently, Drew and Cody recently. This would have led to Drew winning the championship, and then eventually we get Cody and Randy down the line after Cody wins the belt back from Drew. Probably, maybe at WrestleMania, maybe at the Royal Rumble, or, whenever. To me, that would have been a great talking point, because you not only get a shocking championship change, but you also get a teaser for the Cody-Randy feud that we've been waiting on forever. I don't understand why WWE does not go in the direction of Orton versus Cody. To me, this is a money feud, and unless they're saving it for Mania, which maybe they are, to me it makes no sense to keep putting it off. This feud could legit take up half the year, and it's got a lot more grounded history than even Punk versus Seth, which I enjoy, by the way. But I think the potential for this feud between Cody versus Randy is even greater, because we've seen them interact on screen. We know the history. We know what the deal is between those two. To me, it could be one of the best feuds we've seen in the last few years. But I'm not in that spot at the end of the day. And as far as I know, Randy did not appear on Wrestlepalooza. So I don't have the power to change that or make it what I would like to see. If nothing else, Drew deserves a title run, and it was the right time for something like this in my eyes, even if Drew just wins the championship for a couple months. I mean, the guy deserves it, and it would have given you that shocking moment you were looking for, and it would have added more layers to Cody versus Randy down the line, or maybe even just the Cody Rhodes character in general. Him losing right after coming back from a big Hollywood sabbatical, I guess. Not a sabbatical, but you know what I mean. He was gone in Hollywood. If you do that, then, man, you could have completely changed the complexion of this feud in this situation for the next few months. That's not what would happen. They went with a predictable result. Cody just beats Drew clean and holds on to the championship. Kind of an underwhelming finish in that one, and I don't know, it just didn't hit the way that I think WWE was expecting it to, or maybe they knew it was going to be underwhelming. They just tried to, make it seem bigger than what it was going to be. I will say this, shout out to Stephanie Vaquer versus Io Sky. Great match. It really saved the PLE in my eyes. Someone on a social media post said that it felt like something you would see on an AEW pay-per-view. I agree. By the way, that's not a bad thing. That is not a bad thing to have a dream match on a WWE show. Doing things in a bit more of an AEW-centric way, or even Ring of Honor, New Japan, whatever. Not a bad way to do it. It can work on WWE too. Fantastic match. Right choice to give the belt to Vaquer. She's going to be a great Women's World Champion. I think she's got a lot of potential for some great matches down the line, and she'll be one of the best Women's World Champions we've seen so far. Really love what I've seen from Stephanie Vaquer. Now we just have to see how long she holds on to it for and what matches we will get down the road. Maybe we do get that Vaquer-Rhea Ripley match, or maybe even Vaquer-Liv Morgan when she returns. I don't know. There's a lot of ways they could go with it. I'm very curious to see. All in all, though, I think Wrestlepalooza was, I hate to say it, I think it was kind of a mid-PLE. That's not to say there weren't good moments. Again, the Vaquer-Io Sky match was a lot of fun. I loved the mixed tag match. But, you were talking 3 of the 5 matches that were just kind of okay, or, just, I don't know, fine for what they were, or even disappointing to some degree. So when you've got more than half of your pay-per-view, premium live event, whatever the case is, when you got more than half of it that's underwhelming and you're charging $30, it doesn't set a good precedent. There was even a review on the internet that was posted by an ESPN writer that said that he thought Wrestlepalooza was underwhelming. So that, again, that's not ESPN stating that directly, but somebody who works for the company says that he didn't like Wrestlepalooza. So I think they need to go back to the drawing board and rework some things over in Stamford, Connecticut, because they've got a lot of talent and they've got the potential to put on great shows, and I'm sure they will down the line. But this was not one of them. So I'd give Wrestlepalooza probably, at best, C plus probably is what I would say, because there was some good stuff on it, but I wouldn't give it any higher than a C plus for right now. But I did enjoy the other show a little bit more. AEW All Out. We'll get right into the matches. We'll start with FTR taking on Cope and Christian Cage. I expected that this could close the show since Adam Copeland was all over the banner artwork for this pay-per-view, but instead they opened the show with this, which I think it's not a bad decision, still worked out well, and it got the crowd hot early on. This was a really fun match, and again, seeing Cope and Cage tag is always going to be really rewarding to watch. The in-ring chemistry is really obvious between FTR and Cope and Cage because these guys train with each other all the time. They're good friends. They know each other, and they know how to put on great wrestling matches. So it was kind of a slam dunk as far as booking is concerned. A lot of fun spots to watch in this match. I loved the John Cena homages by Adam Copeland. You know what? In a world where we're probably not going to get that Edge versus Cena retirement match, I appreciate at least a little callbacks by both guys. We saw Cena do this with Edge a few weeks ago, and now Cope did it with Cena in AEW. Hit the 5-knuckle shuffle and then the attitude adjustment. It's just a reminder to me that wrestling, at the end of the day, no matter what people say and no matter what your promotion is, it's one big family. So this was really cool to see. I love the callbacks. Didn't expect Beth Phoenix, a.k.a. now Beth Copeland, I guess, to come back in this match and to make her AEW debut. I guess it always was a possibility in the back of everybody's mind, but I didn't expect to see it. Really fun stuff from her. Her taking out Stokely was pretty entertaining as well. Cope and Cage get the win, and it looks like this feud is far from over. I think that's the right decision, because there is a lot more mileage you can get out of FTR and Cope and Cage still kind of developing that chemistry as a tag team or reestablishing that chemistry, because it has been 20 plus years since they've tagged, so of course they're going to be a little bit rusty. Still got the win regardless. FTR, as predicted, would be salty. I didn't expect them to take out Beth Copeland in a really nuclear heat spot, which, by the way, yes, it did look a lot like the Judgment Day spot back in WWE. Yes, I know. But hey, if you're going to replicate something, make sure at least it's a good thing you're replicating, and I think they did here. And as the old saying goes, everyone steals from everyone in wrestling. Not saying it was stolen, but it was very similar. So, hey, it was at least a fun spot, and I get, the idea behind it. And we'll see now how Cope responds on Dynamite tomorrow night, because I'd say he's going to be livid, I think is the right word. He will be livid, so we're going to get some fun stuff down the line. I think this feud needs to keep going for a while. Like I said, there are so many things you can do with all the characters in the storyline, and even bringing in some more outside characters, because Nick Wayne is still on the loose, even with an injury, and he's going to be plotting to eventually do something with Christian Cage. So we'll see. I think eventually this leads to Cope and Cage maybe even winning those tag team championships, maybe from FTR once all said and done. But that will be left to time. We'll see what happens. But I'd give this match a big thumbs up. Really good stuff. Really enjoyed it. MJF and Mark Briscoe in the Tables and Thumbtacks match. That's in Thumbtacks, not and Thumbtacks, by the way. That's what the official match description is. So just to clarify, really quick review on this one. Fun, wild match as expected, bloody and intense. It was everything that a match like this needed for a feud like this. MJF, of course, had been badgering, going after Mark for weeks, and Mark had been ramping up the intensity, and he had been cutting some really fire promos about how he feels as though that he needs the forgiveness of God for what he needs to do to MJF. And as a Christian, that really hit home for me. It's like, man, Mark is fired up right here. It was what you'd expect. Tables, thumbtacks, blood, and pain. Mark had thumbtacks in his elbow pads. MJF and Mark had them on their pants. Bryce Remsburg had them in his shoes. Don't say wrestlers and referees, for that matter, don't put themselves through some utter insanity sometimes, because they absolutely do. I was a little shocked by the result. I thought legit that they were going to keep MJF looking strong for more matches down the road with Hangman or something like that, but instead they gave the win to Mark Briscoe, which means that this feud is probably going to continue. And I don't hate the decision. I'm just curious where they're going to take this, unless they really are just going to make it a 1-1 split with MJF taking one, Mark Briscoe taking one. We'll see. I feel like a rubber match is probably in order. The question is, when are they going to do it, and what kind of stipulation will it be? Because it's hard to get more intense than tables and thumbtacks. So if there is a rubber match at, say, Wrestle Dream or something like that, what do you do? Do you do a no-holds-barred, lights-out match? I mean, I don't know if we're going to see that from MJF. That's just not his style of wrestling, but then again, I didn't think I'd see him in a tables and thumbtacks match, and here we go. I'm thinking maybe we do a steel cage match between these two. That would definitely set the intensity up to about the highest bar that I could realistically see happening. So I'm going to say maybe a steel cage match somewhere down the line if they do indeed decide to go for a rubber match. But, again, time will tell. We'll learn more about that on Dynamite tomorrow night. Maybe they just go their separate ways and move on. Maybe MJF takes that honeymoon that he's been waiting on, and I'm sure his wife has been hoping for as well. So we'll see how that goes. Final match that I'm going to give a full review for AEW All Out. Hangman Page took on Kyle Fletcher for the AEW World Championship. Great match as expected. I said I felt like we had a 5-star match on the horizon here, and yeah, that's absolutely what this was. These two have proven themselves time and time again this year, and if it wasn't for a certain man named Will Ospreay, you could argue that these have been the co-MVPs of AEW this year, because every time either one of them steps up in the ring, they just absolutely steal the show. Kyle Fletcher's been tearing it up on Collision for weeks now, got his chance to shine on Dynamite with this feud with Hangman Adam Page, and of course Hangman's had bangers this year, had a great match with MJF, a phenomenal match with Will Ospreay at Double or Nothing, and of course the incredible match with Jon Moxley at All In to win the championship. So Hangman, who's by the way number 4 in the PWI 100, absolutely in my opinion deserves his spot. I think this is the best wrestling we've seen from Hangman ever, and with a dance partner like Kyle Fletcher, you know you're going to be in for some magic. Great callbacks. Again, I'm a big fan. I'm a sucker for callbacks, but I love the callbacks in this match to Ospreay and Kenny Omega, both guys who really influenced the careers of Hangman and Kyle Fletcher, respectively. Again, much like the Copacino homages, really love this. And again, it adds layers to the match that people may not think about on the surface. So really love that. Personally, I prefer the AEW style of doing things when it comes to wrestling, which may come as a shock to some or may be groaned on by others, but that's not to disparage WWE by any stretch, because I like WWE too. This is a crazy concept, guys. But I think that you can like both promotions. I know. And it may be shocking to hear, but I think you can like both promotions, believe it or not, and I don't think you have to be a tribalist about professional wrestling. But I do prefer the AEW style just because I prefer the hard-hitting, back-and-forth, really intense stuff. I guess it's more of a New Japan style rather than anything else, but I just really like that style of wrestling. And again, there's nothing wrong if you don't like that. It's just what I prefer. That intensity really comes out in a match like this. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea again, but I think it is some of the best wrestling action that you will find on the planet. And if it is your stuff, then this is everything you could ask for. Hangman won this match after a great back and forth, and I think that in the context of this match, it was handled really well. You can't have Hangman obviously lose this early into his title reign, but you don't want to bury your TNT champion in the process. So what do? You just have the two guys go out there and light it up and have a banger match that's probably match of the night. That's what you do. And that's how you keep both guys protected, put both titles over, and give the fans something that they will remember for a long time to come. I thought it was a great signature match for All Out, and it was a 5-star contest, in my opinion. So you may vehemently disagree. You may think I'm an AEW mark. And if you do, hey, that's your opinion. I get it. I understand why you may feel that way. I like the AEW style at the end of the day, and that's why I preferred All Out compared to Wrestlepalooza. Looking at other All Out matches here, Chris Statlander won the AEW Women's Championship. Really shocking. I did not even give the 4-way women's title match that much time of day, and it's not because I didn't think it wouldn't be good, but I just thought it would be kind of a predictable filler match. I was like, well, Toni Storm will probably pin whoever and just hold on to her belt, or just holding her over until somebody else comes around. But no, that is not indeed what happened. So they've been doing this thing with Statlander with the Death Riders for a while, and they had a seatbelt given to her by Wheeler Yuta in this match. She used it to win, and pinned Toni Storm in the process, actually, not with the seatbelt, but regardless, she got some help from the Death Riders and has been getting assistance from them for a bit of time. She denied their interference after the fact, but I don't know. I think we're building towards something. But in hindsight, I do like the story. I wish it would have been built a little bit better because I think people just look at a four-way and they kind of say, oh, that's a filler match because, there's no way they're going to have the belt change on a four-way. Well, they did. And, maybe that's to the betterment of surprises and shocking moments, but I think it would have been better off as a one-on-one change, but I do prefer one-on-one matches over multi-mans and multi-women's matches overall, so that's just a personal thing. But good for Statman. She deserves it. She's been an AEW mainstay for a while now. I think she was on the roster in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. She has been grinding for long enough, and she needs a chance to be a champion. So this had been long overdue. Congrats to her, and I'm curious to see where they go. Is Toni going to go back after the championship? Does this launch a new iteration in the Timeless character? Because she looked just flabbergasted after the match was over, and knowing Toni's character work, I think there's some really fun stuff you could do. This is going to be interesting. So congrats to Chris Statlander, and we'll see what happens with Toni Storm down the stretch. But this is a fun time if you're a fan of the AEW women's division. And lastly, Darby Allin over Jon Moxley, or actually Jon Moxley over Darby Allin, I should say. I thought that Darby was really going to win this match, and I'm a little disappointed that they had Jon Moxley win. I figured you have Mox lose this match to continue his continued decline over the past few weeks, but instead they had Darby Allin lose this one. And again, for his big return match, I just don't know if I agree with that. Obviously, Darby's the crash and burn guy, and he did crash and burn in a big way here. But what happened was Pac returned from injury, and that kind of changed the whole dynamic of this coffin match, which had been, again, as you'd expect, chaotic before that. What you would think you would see from a Darby Mox match is about what it was. And Pac comes back, short hair, had a shirt on, but it was a really interesting match and a really interesting finish. So at the end of the day, I think that Jon Moxley winning isn't the worst thing, I guess, especially if you have a plan down the line, but just a bizarre way to go about it. So, hey, Jon Moxley gets the win. Darby Allin, hopefully he gets a rematch because he needs to beat Mox in a straight-up one-on-one. It has been far too long, and the fact that he didn't win here, kind of shocking to me. But we'll see what Tony Khan and AEW have planned, and I'm sure they've got something up their sleeve. But I do think that was a bit of a down decision, at least in my opinion, something that took away from All Out. But overall, I would still say that All Out was the better show compared to Wrestlepalooza. Again, some of it is personal taste, but I just think that the presentation of Wrestlepalooza was not as good as it could have been. I think the matches were a little bit underwhelming. I think the results were a little bit underwhelming, especially with all the hype that had been surrounding Wrestlepalooza. I thought All Out kind of let the wrestling speak for itself a little bit more, and they had better overall, I'd say better overall stories, better overall emotion, and just higher quality matches. But again, that is just my opinion. If you think Wrestlepalooza was better, I understand. I can't blame you. That's your opinion on that one. So that is going to do it for this week's edition, or this Tuesday's edition, I should say, because we've got 2 episodes this week and every week right here on Everything is Electric. We will be back on Thursday, and we got a big Thursday show coming up. We're going to be previewing probably the biggest week of the year in college football. Week 5 is upon us, and it's going to be crazy. There's going to be some wild earthquake games, as I'll call them, that will take place. We're going to see some big tectonic shifts in the world of college football, and we will be there Thursday to preview all of that action. Several big-time matchups. It'll probably take up half the show. We'll also preview Week 4 of the NFL. All the big-time matchups coming up. You won't want to miss that. And we'll talk some more wrestling and maybe even preview the MLB playoff picture as the MLB playoffs are looking to get started. And anything else that you guys want us to hear, want us to talk about right here on Everything is Electric, I will be happy to discuss that for you. So again, this has been Everything is Electric with yours truly, Dylan Simmons, from the beautiful campus of Middle Tennessee State University. Remember, we're all sports, all wrestling, all the time. Have an electric night, and we will see you on Thursday.